What happens when fear pushes a family away from home, and tragedy follows every step of the journey? Elimelech's story begins during one of the darkest seasons in Israel's history. A famine devastated Bethlehem. Fear spread through the land, and one difficult decision changed the future of an entire family forever. At first, Elimelech's story appears to end in complete disaster. But hidden beneath the grief, God was quietly preparing one of the greatest redemption stories in biblical history, a story that would eventually lead to King David, and ultimately Jesus Christ himself. Today, we uncover the remarkable story of Elimelech. 1. What do you do when survival and faith seem to collide? A famine struck Bethlehem. Food disappeared, fear spread, and Elimelech faced a painful decision. In Ruth 1, Elimelech took his wife Naomi and their sons out of the promised land into Moab, a foreign nation with a troubled history against Israel. At first, the move probably looked temporary, practical, necessary, but the story quickly turned tragic. Elimelech died in Moab, and eventually Naomi lost her sons as well. What began as an escape from hardship became a season of deep loss. Elimelech's story reminds us that fear-driven decisions can sometimes lead us far from where God intends us to remain. 2. When Naomi left Bethlehem with Elimelech, she had a husband, 2 sons, and hope for the future. But when she returned years later, everything had changed. In Ruth 1, Naomi walked back into Bethlehem grieving after losing Elimelech and her sons in Moab. The people barely recognized her, and Naomi said, "Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me." She left full, but returned empty. Yet Naomi could not see what God was already preparing through Ruth. Elimelech's story reminds us that even after devastating loss, God can still begin writing a redemption story we cannot yet see. 3. At first, Elimelech's story looked like complete tragedy. He left Bethlehem during famine, died in Moab, and his family line appeared finished. But God was still writing the story. In Ruth 4, Ruth married Boaz, and Naomi's broken family line was restored through a son named Obed. That child became the grandfather of King David, and generations later, the line of David led to Jesus Christ himself. Elimelech never lived to see the redemption God would bring from his family's pain, but God transformed loss into legacy. Elimelech's story reminds us that even when life feels unfinished or broken, God can still build a future far greater than we imagine. 4. The name Bethlehem literally means house of bread. But during Elimelech's lifetime, there was no bread left. A devastating famine struck the land of Judah during the chaotic days of the judges. Fear spread quickly. Families faced starvation. Uncertainty ruled the nation. And in Ruth 1 verse 1, Elimelech made the difficult decision to leave Bethlehem and travel to Moab searching for survival. It looked like a practical solution, but the famine became more than a food crisis. It became a spiritual test. Would fear control the future, or would faith? Elimelech's story reminds us that difficult seasons often reveal where we place our deepest trust. 5. After Elimelech died in Moab, Naomi was left alone with her 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, far from Bethlehem, far from home. The family began building a new life in Moab. Then something unexpected happened. In Ruth 1, Elimelech's sons married Moabite women named Ruth and Orpah. At the time, nobody could have imagined how important one of those marriages would become. Because through Ruth, God was quietly preparing the future family line of King David. What looked like an ordinary family decision became part of a much greater redemption story. Elimelech's story reminds us that God can still work through broken situations and unexpected people to accomplish his purpose. Elimelech's story began with famine and loss, but ended as part of one of the Bible's greatest redemption stories. His family's journey reminds believers that God can transform even the darkest seasons into future hope and eternal purpose. Like, share, and subscribe for more Bible stories and Christian motivation.